This image here shows you a scene that you would see if you were scuba diving off of the California coast. Here we have a harbor seal in a bed of kelp. So the kelp is one of the organisms that has the ability to use light energy to make their own food molecules. The process is photosynthesis, and the term for those organisms are autotrophs, which literally means self-feeders. So that includes all green plants, all the different types of algae, brown seaweed or kelp, green seaweeds, red seaweeds, and the single-celled algae floating on the ocean surface. And in addition, some photosynthetic bacteria, which invented the process of photosynthesis some 3 billion years ago. Other organisms, such as our harbor seal here, and all animals and fungi, cannot use light energy. They have to obtain their energy by consumption, by eating other organisms. And the term for those are heterotrophs. Troph still means food or feeding, and hetero means other. So here we have a very simple diagram of the synthesis steps of photosynthesis. On the left, we have the inputs required for photosynthesis. Photo means light. So on the left, we have the raw materials, light, carbon dioxide, which is inorganic, obtained either from the air or from dissolved carbon dioxide in the ocean or lakes, and water. The chemical reactions that take place inside of photosynthesizers convert these raw materials into carbohydrates, such as sugars and starch molecules, and also oxygen is a waste product released by plant leaves, released by algae, and not used in the process. Here we have a more detailed equation. Here on the left-hand side, it shows 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 molecules of water. Here's the light energy, makes 1 molecule of glucose. So 1 molecule of glucose has 6 carbons, and then as a carbohydrate, it has hydrogens and oxygens in the ratio of water, 2 hydrogens for every oxygen. And because there's 6 carbons in glucose, it means that on the left side of the equation, on the reactant side, we need to also have 6 carbons because there's 12 total hydrogens here. We need 6 water molecules, 6 times 2 is 12. And here, oxygen gas is released as a waste product. Well, both of these have oxygens, so we need to balance the oxygen number on either side of the equation. Here in the text, it details where the oxygen comes from. The oxygen released as a byproduct in photosynthesis was originally in the water molecules. So the light energy absorbed by chlorophyll, and the next slides we'll step through that process. Here is the glucose molecule. So here it details that this is chemical energy. So the conversion is some light energy into a glucose molecule, and then that glucose molecule can immediately be used by the algae or by the plant for its own energy needs, for synthesizing molecules, for growing, for importing molecules from outside a cell inside a cell, like root molecules or root cells use energy. Or it could be stored. It could be stored, for example, in roots, like potatoes. That represents a starch store Not so much for us to eat, but for future growth of the plant, maybe next year. Similarly, energy stored as starch inside barley or wheat grains, that's a supply of energy for the next generation of plants, because that is the energy stored for the seeds to grow when they're underneath the surface of the soil where there's no light for photosynthesis. And then some of the glucose is used to build up cell structures such as the plant cell wall, which is a long chain of glucose units called cellulose. At the bottom, it kind of shows the three major groups of photosynthesizing organisms. We've got plants. Here we have blueberries, kelp, representing all different types of algae, and then cyanobacteria representing different photosynthetic bacteria. So we're stepping inside of the plant cells or the algae cells here to look at where photosynthesis takes place. So inside of the plant cells, detailed here, we've got 1, 2, 3, there could be hundreds of chloroplasts. So the chloroplast is the organelle in which photosynthesis takes place. Other plant cells, such as root cells, don't see light, they don't really photosynthesize. There wouldn't be much need or usefulness of having chloroplasts there. They get their sugars made in the leaves internally through transport. So a chloroplast, an organelle, it has two membranes. In the inner membrane, the inner membrane is folded into stacks called thylakoids. The animation that you're going to see from the amoeba sisters will step through this in a little bit more detail. Here it shows that there is the photo step where chlorophyll pigments absorb wavelengths of light. In that first step, water molecules that for a plant has traveled through the roots from the soil up the stem and into the leaves, they are broken. The hydrogens and the electrons are going to be used to make carbohydrates. Oxygen here is a waste product. It's released back into the atmosphere or back into the water. The synthesis step to the right here takes place in the fluid-filled stroma inside the chloroplast. Carbon dioxide gas is absorbed, and technically the term is it is reduced or fixed. Hydrogens are added to it, carbons, hydrogens, oxygens. The energy made during the photosteps, the ATP energy, is used here to attach chemicals together to make the bonds of glucose. So that's the summary equation on the bottom: sunlight, water, carbon dioxide. Sunlight and water are used in step 1, photo. Carbon dioxide is the base for building the glucose molecule here on the right, one of the products. So the same slide that we looked at before, here highlighting the photo part takes place in the thylakoid membranes. Chlorophyll, the green pigment that we see, is responsible for absorbing the useful wavelengths of light for the plant. The synthesis part requires carbon dioxide. That takes place in a different part of the chloroplast, in the fluid-filled interior, the stroma. And here we have a little diagram here. You recognize this as the colors of the rainbow. Light coming from the sun contains a variety of different wavelengths. It's called white light, but it consists of different wavelengths from the reds, which are longer wavelengths, contain a little bit less energy, through the yellows, greens, blues, and then into the violets, shorter wavelengths that have more energy. So what will shine from the sun on the surface of the leaf is all of these wavelengths. What we see is the green light that the plants don't absorb. So it's reflected, it leaves the surface of the leaves, that enters our eye. That's what we interpret as green, and it's green, if you like, because the red wavelengths and the blue wavelengths have been absorbed by the plant. They don't leave the plant, So what we're seeing is the light that struck the leaf with the red and blue lights subtracted. So we see green. So this concept, carbon fixation, we again will come back to this when we look at the global climate and the changes in the global climate, climate change, global warming, caused by increase in greenhouse gases, of which carbon dioxide is one of the greenhouse gases. So here, photosynthesis removes carbon dioxide, and here the word capture is used. Carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere, removed from the oceans, and it becomes part of an organic molecule, becomes fixed. It's no longer a gas. It can be in part of a sugar molecule. It could be part of a cellulose molecule, a cell wall. It could be part of lignin, the hard woody component of shrubs and tree branches. And as such, it could remain inside that plant for tens of years or even hundreds of years. So over here on the right, the synthesis reactions are taking carbon dioxide and oxygen, so one carbon, two oxygens, and adding other carbons to it to make a chain of carbons, oxygens, and the hydrogens that originally started off in the water molecule are added to make carbohydrate. So the purpose, again, is for the plants to make their own molecules. They do this for energy, but they also do this for growth. Once the carbon has been fixed by photosynthesis, then it can be available to other organisms. It enters the food chain. It can be eaten. It could end up as part of a cow. It could end up as part of a beaver. And as such, carbon fixation is the only way that carbon and energy, the food animals eat, remember, is the energy they require. So the only way that it enters the global energy chain, energy balance. So plants are green, or the leaves appear green to us because of chlorophyll molecules that preferentially absorb red light wavelengths and blue light wavelengths. There are other pigments that absorb light. There are yellow ones, xanthophylls, that absorb blue light and appear yellow to us, reddish ones, anthocyanins, that primarily absorb blue light, green light, reflect back red like some of the red seaweeds. And here we detail that it's the red and blue wavelengths. Here, photons is used to describe a packet of light energy, like a quantifiable unit of energy. They are absorbed by chlorophyll, and as chlorophyll absorbs photons, one of the outer electrons of chlorophyll literally jumps to a higher energy state, an outer, more orbital. It is energized, and that energy in those outer electrons are used to generate inside of the chloroplast ATP. Now, ATP, as we'll see in chapter 6, is described as the universal energy currency of cells. All cells, bacteria cells, algae cells, animal cells, only use ATP for cell work. Then they need some way of generating ATP, or I should say regenerating, and photoautotrophs use light. So now I'll direct you to watch and maybe rewatch the photosynthesis animation by the Amoeba Sisters on Web Access. Then we'll finish up with a little discussion of fossil fuel formation, which was originally formed by photosynthesis.